Here are some morbid facts about Star Wars. Before filming The Empire Strikes Back, Mark Hamill was in a car accident that nearly killed him and required reconstructive facial surgery using part of his ear. Hamill thought the injuries would ruin his career, but they were explained in the movie when Luke gets attacked by a Wampa. While filming Return of the Jedi in the forests of California, the actor who played Chewbacca was given strict instructions to never wander off. This was because the film crew was afraid that hunters would mistake him for Bigfoot and try to kill him. In The Phantom Menace, young Anakin Skywalker was played by actor Jake Lloyd. But at the age of 12, he retired from acting due to bullying and destroyed all of his Star Wars memorabilia. Years later, he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia after being involved in a high-speed car chase with police. In April of 2023, 56-year-old Michael Dale paid an OF model more than $11,000 for an extreme fetish session at his home in Escondido, California. Dale reportedly requested a series of disturbing acts, including being wrapped tightly in plastic like a mummy and having boots glued to his feet. Prosecutors later said the session escalated far beyond what had been agreed to, with Dale eventually found unresponsive with a plastic bag and duct tape over his face, while the woman allegedly filmed parts of the encounter. He was declared brain dead the following day after suffering fatal suffocation. Michaela Rylersdam, a 32-year-old mother of three, was initially charged with second-degree murder before pleading guilty to involuntary manslaughter in 2026. Built under Saddam Hussein in 1986, Iraq's Mosul Dam is considered one of the most dangerous dams on Earth because it was built atop a foundation of dissolving gypsum rock that constantly erodes beneath it. To keep the dam stable, crews have spent decades continuously pumping grout into the foundation to fill growing voids, with engineers at times injecting dozens of tons of grout per day as part of the around-the-clock maintenance operation. U.S. officials and engineers have warned that if the dam were to catastrophically fail, a massive wall of water could slam into Mosul within hours before surging toward Baghdad, with some worst-case estimates claiming up to 1.5 million people could die in the resulting floods. This was the moment panic spread through a packed subway train after a man suddenly began spraying an unknown substance into the crowded carriage. As the mist spread through the enclosed train car, confused passengers started covering their faces and frantically trying to move away. Though some reports called it an irritant spray, many online viewers speculated that it may have instead been some kind of prank fart spray. The incident reportedly happened aboard a subway train in Guangzhou, China. The man involved was soon detained by authorities after the incident, though his motive remains unclear. This was the moment a German Shepherd found himself dangling off the edge of a high apartment balcony after laying too close to the edge and slipping underneath the metal railing. Trapped several stories above the ground, the terrified dog desperately tried to hold himself up using only his front paws as his back legs hung helplessly in the air. With nothing to grip onto to pull himself back up, the dog could do nothing but hang on for dear life. If he lost his grip, the fall could have easily killed him or left him severely injured. But suddenly, the exhausted dog noticed his owner becoming aware of the situation and immediately started wagging his tail. Luckily, the woman rushed over and pulled him to safety just moments before the dog became too tired to hang on. Here's a photo of a young girl in Lopburi, Thailand carrying an airsoft gun to defend her food from the city's massive population of wild macaque monkeys. After years of tourists feeding them, Lopburi's monkey population completely exploded, and during COVID, food shortages caused large groups of starving monkeys to become increasingly aggressive toward businesses and pedestrians. Videos from the city have shown hundreds of macaques swarming streets, fighting each other in massive brawls, and snatching food directly from people's hands, leading some locals to carry weapons just to walk through certain areas safely. 1981, 25-year-old John Hinckley Jr. attempted to assassinate U.S. President Ronald Reagan outside of a hotel in Washington, D.C. after becoming obsessively fixated on actress Jodie Foster and believing the attack would impress her. Hinckley fired 6 shots within seconds, seriously wounding Reagan after a bullet ricocheted into his chest and narrowly missed his heart. Press Secretary James Brady was shot in the head and left permanently disabled, with his death in 2014 later being ruled a homicide linked to the shooting, while a Secret Service agent and police officer were also wounded. Hinckley was found not guilty by reason of insanity and spent decades confined to a psychiatric hospital before being gradually released under strict supervision, while Jodie Foster was in fact not impressed by the attack. Tyke was a circus elephant that had spent years performing in traveling shows across the United States. Former handlers later claimed she showed repeated signs of stress and aggression after 12 years of harsh training, confinement, and constant transport. On August 20th, 1994, during a live circus performance in Honolulu, Tyke suddenly became agitated and attacked her trainer in front of the audience, killing him and severely injuring another handler before smashing through an exit and escaping into the streets. Panicked bystanders watched as the elephant rampaged through downtown Honolulu for nearly 30 minutes as police chased her through traffic. Officers eventually shot Tyke 86 times before she finally collapsed and died in the street. The incident later became one of the most infamous examples used by animal rights activists campaigning against performances of circus animals. Here's a photo of Filipina resistance leader and former schoolteacher Nieves Fernandez showing a U.S. Army private how she used a bolo knife to kill Japanese soldiers during the occupation of the Philippines in World War II. Fernandez helped lead a guerrilla resistance force after Japan invaded the country and was reportedly so feared by Japanese troops that a bounty was placed on her head. Historical accounts credit her unit with killing more than 200 Japanese soldiers during the war. David Holmes was a longtime stunt double for Daniel Radcliffe during the Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows era, before a horrific on-set accident during a stunt rehearsal in 2009 left him permanently paralyzed. Holmes broke his neck after being violently thrown into a wall while practicing a flying sequence, suffering a catastrophic spinal injury that ended his stunt career at just 25 years old. Despite the life-altering injury, Holmes remained close friends with Radcliffe for years afterward, with Radcliffe later helping to produce the documentary David Holmes, The Boy Who Lived, about his life, recovery, and the devastating accident that changed everything. A popular mushroom in China known as the little white mushroom has repeatedly poisoned people when eaten undercooked, triggering a rare form of toxic hallucination known as Lilliputian hallucinations. Victims reportedly begin seeing swarms of tiny human-like or fantasy creatures crawling under doors, scaling walls, or clinging to furniture as the mushroom's toxins affect the brain. The bizarre poisonings became so notorious in parts of China's Yunnan province that hospitals documented countless unrelated people describing nearly identical visions of miniature elf-like figures during their episodes. Judith Love Cohen was an American engineer who helped create the guidance system that brought Apollo 13 back home safely. While working on a crucial equation one day, she went into labor but took the problem with her to the hospital. She soon called her boss to tell him that she finished it. Then she gave birth to Jack Black. NASA employs a man named George Aldridge to sniff everything before they send it to space. If George doesn't like the smell, it doesn't go to space. The Kessler syndrome is the theory that a small collision of our satellites could cause a major catastrophe for humanity. The collision could create a cascade where satellites break into tiny pieces and destroy other satellites, until the Earth is surrounded by a massive cloud of flying shrapnel. This would make it impossible to leave the planet for many generations. These are the hands of Japanese serial killer Tsutomu Miyazaki. He was born with a rare birth defect that caused his hand joints to be fused together, preventing him from being able to bend his wrists upwards. Two Mice Eating Cheese is the name of London's smallest statue, which commemorates two construction workers who died in 1862. They were scuffling over a missing sandwich that resulted in both of them falling off the scaffolding. Turns out it was just stolen by mice. The movie Jaws directly contributed to a surge in shark hunting and a massive drop in shark populations. Author Peter Benchley deeply regretted writing Jaws, saying, "Knowing what I know now, I could never write that book today. Sharks don't target human beings, and they certainly don't hold grudges." Today, sharks kill only around 10 humans per year, but humans kill around 11,000 sharks every hour. A 34-year-old man with ALS completely lost the ability to move anything, including his eyes. When a brain chip finally allowed him to communicate again, the first thing he said was, "I need a beer." Seth MacFarlane and Mark Wahlberg were both booked to fly on American Airlines Flight 11, the first plane that crashed into the World Trade Center. Wahlberg decided last minute to fly to Toronto instead, while MacFarlane missed the flight by 10 minutes due to a hangover. Due to technical limitations, video game Deus Ex didn't include the Twin Towers in its skyline. The in-game explanation was that they were destroyed by a terrorist attack. In an episode of Johnny Bravo, there's a poster of a building on fire with the words "Coming Soon." This episode aired in April of 2001, just 5 months before 9/11. In August of 2000, the band Dream Theater recorded a live studio album called Live Scenes from New York. The album cover art features the New York City skyline with the Twin Towers on fire. Most disturbingly, the album was released on September 11, 2001. In proportion to body weight, koalas have one of the smallest brains of any mammal. They're so dumb that when presented with leaves on a flat surface instead of on branches, they are unable to recognize them as food and will not eat them. Dogs get sprayed by skunks so often because skunks raise their tails as a warning. Dogs see this as "come smell my butt," which is the exact opposite message of what the skunk is trying to send. In Germany, it is illegal to kill any vertebrate animal without proper reason. Because of this, all German animal shelters are no-kill. In the 1980s, Ken the orangutan escaped from his enclosure at the San Diego Zoo multiple times. His apparent goals were visiting other animals, taking photos with tourists, and throwing rocks at his orangutan rival. This graveyard of animal bones was found inside the nest of a harpy eagle. Being the most powerful bird in the Amazon, they prey on species as big as monkeys, sloths, and even deer. Deeper than 30 feet underwater, there's no red light, so blood appears green. About 47 million years ago, whales had legs and lived both on land and in the sea. This is a perfectly camouflaged, mossy-tailed gecko, found only in Madagascar. A pike jumped out of the water, likely chasing prey, got stuck in a tree and died. Eventually, a bird came around and built a nest in its mouth. Africa's slowly ripping apart due to continental drift. In 2005, a large crack opened up along fault lines in Ethiopia that will continue to widen. Scientists say this will form an entirely new ocean within the next few million years. This was the moment a zookeeper made a big mistake while working inside a panda enclosure at Chongqing Zoo in China. As 9-year-old panda Ding Ding tried walking through a restricted doorway, the keeper rushed to slam the metal door shut before the animal could get through, accidentally slamming it directly onto the panda's paw. Almost instantly, Ding Ding appeared to become agitated. The panda began chasing the terrified keeper around the enclosure while horrified visitors could do nothing but watch. Soon enough, the 250-pound bear managed to tackle her to the ground, thrashing at her legs and arms while appearing to briefly bite her. The keeper began to scream in terror before she was able to eventually free herself from the grapple. Attacks involving giant pandas are considered extremely rare, especially in zoos, because the animals are normally very calm and spend most of their time eating bamboo or sleeping. But despite their peaceful reputation, pandas are still bears with incredibly powerful jaws and enough bite force to crush bone when provoked or frightened. Despite how violent the footage looked, the zookeeper only suffered minor injuries and was treated at a hospital. The zoo later stated that Ding Ding showed no signs of ongoing aggression afterward and was behaving normally. In Gainesville, Georgia, a group of high school students decided to prank their math teacher by toilet papering his yard late at night. When 40-year-old teacher and golf coach Jason Hughes ran outside, he was reportedly joking around and pretending to catch them in the act as they ran back to their car. But as the teens tried to speed away, Hughes slipped on the wet pavement and fell into the road. One of the students, an 18-year-old driving a pickup truck, accidentally ran him over. Hughes was rushed to the hospital but tragically died from his injuries. The driver was initially charged with first-degree vehicular homicide, while several other students were arrested for trespassing and littering. But Hughes's family later asked prosecutors to drop the charges, saying the beloved teacher cared deeply about his students and never would have wanted any of their lives destroyed over a prank. In June of 2023, in the North Atlantic Ocean near the Titanic wreck site, Pakistani businessman Shahzada Dawood and his 19-year-old son Sulman were among those killed when the Titan submersible suddenly imploded. Nearly 9 months later, after recovery efforts at extreme depths, small amounts of human remains were returned to the family. Identified through DNA testing, the material was described by Shahzada's wife as the slush that was left delivered in 2 small shoe boxes. Due to the conditions of the implosion and the environment, the remains were limited and heavily fragmented, with some of the recovered material being mixed together, meaning it could not be definitively attributed to one specific individual. In Rochester, New York in 2022, a woman installed a hidden trail cam at her mother's grave after noticing it kept being disturbed. The footage soon captured her father, the woman's ex-husband, returning to the cemetery and urinating directly on the grave multiple times per week. The behavior had been going on for at least several months, and likely closer to a year or more before it was caught on camera. In multiple clips, his partner could be seen waiting nearby in a car while he carried out the act. Police were contacted, but the case fell into a gray area legally, with any charges depending on local cemetery regulation. The situation drew attention for the sustained, deliberate nature of the acts, targeting the grave long after the relationship had ended. New fear unlocked. During flash flooding in Omaha, Nebraska in 2021, several people became trapped inside a stalled elevator which was descending toward a lower level that was already completely flooded. After water rushed into the cabin and rose toward their necks, someone called 911 while warning that they may not survive if help didn't arrive in time. Rescuers eventually forced the doors open and pulled them out. Despite the traumatic experience, all of them survived and no one was seriously injured. This was the moment a Brazilian journalist was electrocuted on live TV. In 1996, Lazier Martins was reporting from the Festa da Uva, a major grape festival in southern Brazil, when he touched a cluster of grapes mounted on a metal display that had become electrified. The decorative setup had been wired with small light bulbs, and investigators later said the lighting system was improperly grounded, allowing electrical current to pass into the metal structure supporting the grapes. When Martins made contact, he completed the circuit and received a 220-volt shock, knocking him to the ground and briefly rendering him unconscious as cameras continued rolling. The incident was treated as an accident tied to faulty wiring, not intentional tampering. Martins survived without lasting injuries and eventually led a successful career in politics. The scourged back is an 1863 photograph of an escaped enslaved man named Peter, also known as Gordon, taken after he reached a Union Army camp during the American Civil War. The image shows his back covered in thick keloid scars caused by repeated brutal whippings while enslaved on a Louisiana plantation. The scars were the result of agonizing abuse severe enough to permanently disfigure his skin. When the photograph was published and widely circulated in northern newspapers, it provided undeniable visual proof of the physical cruelty of slavery and became one of the most powerful abolitionist images of the 19th century. Brazilian girl Helena Valera was kidnapped as a child in the 1930s by members of the Yanomami, an isolated indigenous group living deep in the Amazon rainforest. She spent more than 20 years living among them, where she endured repeated violence, forced marriages, sexual abuse, and the killing of her children during tribal conflicts. After escaping back to Western society in 1956, she struggled to reintegrate and was treated as an outsider, never fully belonging to either world. Haunted by trauma, yet emotionally tied to the only life she truly knew, Valero eventually chose to return to live with indigenous tribes in the Amazon, remaining there until her death in 2003, a rare and unsettling case of someone voluntarily returning to a society that once abducted them. Tara Calico was a 19-year-old University of New Mexico student who disappeared on September 20th, 1988 while riding her bike near her home in Belen, New Mexico. She never returned, and no physical evidence of her fate was ever found. 3 months after she went missing, a Polaroid was discovered in a Florida parking lot, showing a young woman and a boy bound and gagged inside a van. Tara's family believed the woman closely resembled her, noting similar facial features and a scar consistent with Tara's medical history. But the photo was never definitively identified or traced to its source. Tara Calico was never found, the boy in the photo was never identified, and no arrests were ever made. In 2023, Delbert Cornish shot and killed his 18-year-old daughter, Hope Onyx Cornish, inside their home in Caldwell, Idaho. After killing her, he also shot and killed her pet cat. Cornish later admitted to the killings, telling police, "My kids died by my hand." At the time of her death, Hope had reportedly been turning her life around. Family members said she'd been sober for more than a year, was working, and had recently started building more stability in her life. But despite this, Cornish told investigators he killed her and her cat because he was, quote, tired of them being made fun of. Authorities found no evidence of provocation or self-defense and said the killing was deliberate. Cornish later pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in prison. This was the moment a 7-Eleven was destroyed during a brazen Christmas Eve ATM theft in Texas. In the early morning hours of December 24, 2025, surveillance footage from a 7-Eleven near Fort Worth shows two suspects smashing through the front of the store, attaching a cable to the ATM and using a stolen SUV to violently rip the machine through the building. After destroying half the store, the suspects fled, abandoning the ATM and SUV nearby and still remain unidentified. There's a tree in Pakistan that's been chained and officially arrested since 1898. This happened when a drunk British officer thought the tree was moving towards him and ordered one of his men to arrest it. 3 Nigerian men were arrested at Oran International Airport in Algeria after trying to fly to Dubai disguised as Arab women. Wrapped in hijabs, niqabs, and heavy makeup, they tried to slip through security, but officers noticed their documents didn't match and spotted stubble beneath the veils. A quick secondary check exposed the trio immediately, and they were taken into custody on the spot. In December of 2025, 33-year-old Mexican-Canadian influencer Denise Gongora, known online as Mary Magdalene for her extreme cosmetic procedures and adult content, was found dead after falling from a 9th-floor high-rise in Phuket, Thailand. Just a few hours before her death, she shared this troubling post suggesting deep emotional exhaustion, prompting concern from fans. In the weeks leading up to the incident, videos circulated showing her appearing heavily intoxicated and being assisted back to her hotel by police and bystanders. Thai authorities reviewed security footage, witness statements, and scene evidence before officially concluding the case was a self-inflicted death. Carolina Olsen, later nicknamed the Sleeping Beauty of Sweden, went to bed at age 14 on a small Swedish island in 1876 and effectively stayed asleep for the next 32 years. For decades, she lay unresponsive, barely speaking, rarely moving, and depending on others to feed and care for her. When she finally awakened in 1908, she reportedly believed it was the same day she had fallen asleep. Although doctors later noted brief moments of awareness during those years, Olsen experienced no sense of time passing, essentially sleeping half her life away. In 1957, two young sisters in England, Joanna and Jacqueline Pollock, were killed instantly when a speeding car suddenly struck them during their walk to church. Their parents were shattered by the loss, but a year later they had twin daughters, Gillian and Jennifer, who as they grew began showing strange overlaps with the former girls' lives, recognizing toys they'd never seen, describing places they'd never visited, and developing an intense fear of cars. Jennifer was reportedly even born with birthmarks in the same locations as Jacqueline's. The memories eventually faded, but the Pollock twins became one of the most cited cases in discussions of childhood reincarnation, with some people believing it was true reincarnation and others arguing it was grief, suggestion, or outright coincidence. A 6-year-old boy from Missouri was subjected to a staged kidnapping orchestrated by his own family to teach him a lesson about stranger danger. Police say an aunt's coworker lured him into a truck, told him he'd never see his mother again, and threatened to nail him to the wall of a shed. When he started sobbing, the man showed him a handgun and ordered him to stop crying. Investigators say he tied the boy's hands and feet, covered his face, and drove him around for hours while the child begged to go home. Once back at the house, relatives brought him into the basement and kept the act going, lecturing him about strangers while he was still terrified and restrained. Multiple adults were later charged after authorities said the ordeal caused genuine trauma, inflicted by the very people meant to protect him.